I'm Gregory Stieber. I'm a writer and director in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'm a guest writer and instructor for Fort Wayne Youth Theater. You know, the AIDS virus itself was such a monster at the time when I was coming out, and that was in the late 80s and the early 90s, and it was just something that myself and my friends, we talked about it a little bit, but it's something we actually were trying to sweep under the carpet as well. We didn't want to think about it. And I just remember Ryan White being such an example of that, and him getting connected with famous people like Elizabeth Taylor, and and then she went on to be such an important part of AmFAR, that I thought, if this kid who, it didn't really matter that he wasn't, but he wasn't even a homosexual man, if he could be brave and look it in the face, we should too. And I can't say it's exactly because of Ryan White, but it did, my awareness of it did prompt me to go to the city county building here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, to the Board of Health, and get my first HIV test, which at that time we had to wait 2 weeks for the results. But I thought it's something I need to be doing as a responsible gay man, and it lifted a lot of weight off my shoulders too, by actively looking at my status as a gay man, HIV positive or HIV negative. Fortunately, I was negative, and I continue to be to this day, but I don't think it's anything any of us should take for granted. In 2015, Executive Director Leslie Horman of Fort Wayne Youth Theater, we had a really interesting conversation about a previous production we had done about Mary Ingalls of the Little House series, about her blindness. And because of the success of that production, we decided to look at other young people from history that faced adversity and triumphed. And Ryan White was, I think, really the first one that came to my mind, given that he was someone of my generation. He was a freshman when I was a senior in high school, and he was from Indiana. And so I felt very connected to him in so many different ways. I felt for him and the struggles he went through. I admired him, that he persevered. And I was on the crux of coming out as a homosexual man, and the AIDS virus was so at the forefront of all of our minds at the time, yet we were afraid to talk about it. And then we had a 13-year-old boy right in our backyard that wasn't afraid to talk about it. I thought it was important in two ways to remind the kids that we were working with, who, their age range was largely 12 to 18 years old, and that I know when I was that age, at the time of the AIDS crisis, I was very much thinking about it. I wanted to make sure that their generation was doing the same thing and not taking anything for granted, that it's still very much with us. We've come a long way with therapies and in awareness and research, yet it's still here, and I think it was important for them to remember that. A lot of them did, and then a lot of them simply did not know about the virus, how the virus works, how it is transmitted. And I think it was really important to get back to that sort of awareness that was so hyper aware at the time we set our play, but yet it's still here with us, and I think it was imperative that we still talk about it. So one of my big goals when I wrote the play was to make this play for a teenage audience, or even younger than that. So take very complicated, information like the virus itself, the legal battle that Ryan went through, and write it in a way that would make it accessible to an audience. And so when the executive director of the organization, Jeff Markley, came in, I actually really owe him a bit of a writing credit, because he broke down the virus in a way to my young actor that was describing how he felt to the audience in a way that would really make it make sense to a young audience. And I think that was one of the most impactful days we had in our rehearsal process, is when Jeff came in, because he found a way to make the virus realistic and not this vague thing, but something that was very specific. And he then imparted that onto my actor, and then my actor imparted that onto the audience. And I got to give all the credit to that, to the Positive Resource Connection. We couldn't have had a better source and a better advisement team for our project. We opened in February of 2015 to sold-out audiences that I think we reached two different groups of people. We brought people from my generation who wanted their kids to know the story about Ryan White, because a lot of kids of our current generation, they do not know who he is. And it was important to us as a production team to remind people that there was a young man their age that lived right in their backyard in Kokomo, Indiana, that was incredibly brave. And in a time when the AIDS virus was something that was so stigmatized and people were so afraid of it, yet he wanted to be educated. So he fought through a lot of adversity, a lot of taunting, a lot of bullying, but held his ground and won his right to be educated. And so the story evolved from there. We created a production that we were very proud of, with a full cast of about 30 children and a handful of adults, and it was received very, very well. And I think the biggest thing is that we reminded the world who Ryan White was and what he did for the AIDS crisis. I've participated in countless AIDS walks here in Fort Wayne, and every time I've walked, I'm remembering why we're all walking is that the virus is still here. It's something that has not gone away. Since the time of our story of Ryan White, which took place in the late 80s, much has improved, much has been become more clear, and there's a lot of awareness has been raised, but there's one simple fact that remains: the virus is still with us, and people are still with us with the virus. One man that worked on the production, who's very much public about his HIV status, was one of the heart and souls of the production, and the fact that we work together every day that's just one shining example of why the AIDS Walk is so important. It's still with us, and sometimes it's right next to us, and we work together to maybe never have to do the walk again, but until that time, everyone should be walking. I'm Gregory Stieber, and I support the Positive Resource Connection.